Welcome, Freedom Fighter 1776. I'm your host, Mark Charles Bashaw. Another show, another episode. It's going to be a good one, folks. We've got Ken Conklin in the house. Ken is a medically retired U.S. Navy Corpsman who served honorably from 2002 to 2019. During his 17-year military service, Ken spent 9 years embedded with Marine infantry units and a police transition team, eventually becoming an independent duty corpsman with Marine Special Operations. He deployed multiple times to Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Asia, and other regions around the world. After suffering a serious non-combatant spinal injury in 2013 and undergoing neck fusion surgery, Ken was medically retired in 2019 and transitioned through the Wounded Warrior program. Motivated by his own healing journey, Ken pursued a Master's of Arts in Counseling at Northwestern University with plans to serve fellow veterans and their families. However, in 2020, he withdrew from the program after objecting to its CRT-driven curriculum and filing formal complaints with both the university and the U.S. Department of Education for Title IX violations. His wife, then pregnant, was later removed from the same program in 2022 for declining the COVID-19 bioweapon while attending online class. Wow. They kicked her out for refusing. That's something we got to talk about. I want to dig into that because that's wild. Ken became a local symbol of resistance during the COVID-19 era while working at Fish Hut Grill in Emerald Isle, North Carolina, one of the only businesses in the region openly defying lockdowns and mandates. In 2021, he enrolled in an agricultural program to launch a sustainable oyster and clam business aimed at funding future veteran retreats. But after refusing to comply with the renewed mask policies, he was removed from the program, citing federal informed consent laws and protesting it publicly. Since then, Ken has been deeply engaged in North Carolina's medical freedom movement, speaking at school board meetings, testifying in public hearings, organizing grassroots efforts, and helping pass county-level resolutions opposing unconstitutional mandates. In 2023, Carteret County GOP became the first in the state to pass formal resolution banning the COVID-19 bioweapon experimental jabs and condemning pandemic overreach. The pandemic era overreach largely due to Ken's efforts. Today, Ken works as a military contractor. He's completing a master's in clinical herbalism and runs Black Flag Botanicals, a traditional herbal practice rooted in pre-pharma American medicine. His devoted husband and father, raising a young family while walking boldly in faith, truth, and service to others, guided by his relationship with Jesus Christ Almighty. Ken, welcome to the studio, brother. Glad to have you. Let's dive right into this, man. So, independent duty corpsman, you got out before the shit hit the fan in 2020, but clearly you've been in the trenches. Tell us about it. Tell us what happened, and you know, your wife getting booted from online school for refusing the jab. That's quite ridiculous, but not surprising given all the stuff we had to deal with. So welcome.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Yes, like where to dive in. It's like, man, I honestly just have to put it back in the faith perspective, and that's what gave me the strength to kind of continue on and believe and have faith in people like you. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate you taking me on. It's a great time. I haven't really kind of laid this all out before, so it's hearing you go through the story of it all is like thinking in my mind. I'm like, man, it's like just constant.
It's tough. It's like, where do I start? Because there's so many stories inside the stories of the craziness. One thing we were talking about before we started the show, folks, we were talking about the emergency use authorization and how you, as an independent duty corpsman, you had a lot of experience in that regard. Could you dive into that a little bit for the audience and the public in general on why that's an important distinction with these medical devices, jabs, products, whatever you want to call them.
Right. Yeah, that's my first experience of it was during a deployment when we were using medications that had emergency use authorization, one of them being ketamine, and it was being emergency use for emergency trauma in Afghanistan. It was wasn't FDA approved, it was an emergency use. So I wasn't involved in like development or using it. I just remember getting the authority and kind of looking into it, like what does this mean exactly? Because that was just it was such an effective product when we were in country for trauma that I was like, ketamine should be, it's utilized in the
man.
UK. Did you lose me?
Let me see here. Let me see if my audio cut out on my side. Oh, it did. Sorry, my audio cut out. Can you hear me?
I got you good.
Oh, I got no audio.
How about now? Can you hear me?
All right. Sorry about that. I think
sure it was you or me? It might be me.
I still don't have it. What happened?
No, got me? Still got me?
I don't know. I can't hear audio for some reason. It was working good.
I can hear you.
Hear me? You can hear me. I don't know. Is it the...
Let me go back. Let me try.
My audio is set up good. Can you hit that cogwheel again? Make sure it didn't switch for whatever reason.
Through it. Can you hear me now?
Is there a battery in the headset? Maybe.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hear me? Check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
What the heck is going on? Let me see here. Let me jump out of the studio. I'll jump back in.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Or
yeah, I can hear.
All right, I got you. So I'll edit this out. Sorry about that. I don't know.
No, it could have been my phone switching over. So I turned off my phone. So it may have been connected to my Bluetooth double, so
I got
maybe.
you. Yeah, no worries. I can I'll just run an edit.
Sorry.
I'll figure it out. No worries, brother. Go ahead, man. We were talking about the EUAs.
Yeah, so the EUA, my first experience in Afghanistan in 2013. And when I don't know if you want me to continue on with that, but that was with me going into country, we were given the ketamine, and then I used ketamine in country under EUA authorization.
So now you say you got, you didn't have to use it, but you said you got the training for the EUA, right? Like where did that come from?
That was mostly just specifically as a title of using ketamine was under EUA authority. So me looking at the authority was more of like, well, then what was the authority given? And then I'm not sure because I've looked at it several times. I like specifically the code that you referenced, 21 US section code 36 BBBB, that 360 BBB, that one specifically states in there too, is if an emergency use product that informed consent must be done. Now, in an emergency situation, informed consent's implied because it's an emergency and you're trying to save someone's help. So that was the informed consent. Now, when it comes to other EUA products, once I kind of compared it to COVID, just that experience wasn't really training as much as it's like, hey, this is just the authority of what you fall under when you use it. So, but in 2020, when everything started coming down, March 2020, I was like, this is not making sense. This is not I think it was like the infection fatality rate that was coming out of Italy at the time. I was like, it's not matching what they were predicting. So EUA was when they made the mandate or when they first came down, and I watched every one of Trump's, as if I could, I would watch his public daily briefings and listen to what they said because I was watching for the law to be referenced on what they were doing. And once they said EUA, emergency use authorization, it went back to that 21 US section code. And then of course, online at the time, everyone's talking about it. I'm in those groups of circles of people trying to understand the law more. And it kind of became, it's very rare that people know that. So I reference it and people are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it's federal law, man. There's like actually like there's fines and jail time associated to this. This isn't just me making a claim. It's just the fact that it's law. This is what they can do.
Right. I mean, it's spelled out. It's black and white. Like,
Yeah,
I've
and this is
hammered
before the vaccines too, Mark. It's not like this was like, oh, the vaccine came out and I was looking at EUA. It's like it specifically started with just masks, because I was like, my mask experience is what kind of changed it too. Because I was in Gitmo. Like my first trip was to Guantanamo Bay as like a support corpsman working at the Camp Delta, and we General Pop working with them. They all come from Afghanistan having TB, so we were wearing paper masks and they were wearing masks, and we're taking guys as corpsmen, moving them over to the respiratory techs to let them pound their chest out and stuff and get the bacteria out and give them their antibiotics, INHB6. Well, guess what? You know, if you're down there working with people with TB, there's no way you can protect yourself with a mask, especially as a bacteria. So the medical officer was down there. I can't remember his name, but he was down there. And I remember asking him the question at the time. This is like 2003. I was like, hey, why are we not like wearing better masks? And like these things, I don't want to wear this in Cuba. This is hot. It's like, why don't, you know, is there something better? He's like, man, you'd have to wear a full respirator. You see what the RTs do when they go in there and they work on these people? Like they're fully respirated. Do you want to wear a respirator? I'm like, no, I don't want to wear a mask. And he's like, yeah, it's just, you're going to have to assume the risk. And I was like, huh, and that's with TB. So guess what? I popped positive for TB the next year later for having my INH. So I had to go on INHB6 for 9 months, you know, because I was a reactive TB. This is 2005-ish, you know. So point is just that it wasn't like I knew this as the pandemic happened, but it was like the experiences I had in the past really set me up to understand and stand it. And when I heard like your story and all those others, you know, I'm sharing information. You know how it was back in 2020 where you're telling people like, hey, you know, it's not mandated. You don't have to actually do anything. Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, I mean, I guess that's the EUA falls under all that.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like, so you started connecting the dots and putting the puzzle pieces together and be like, wait a second, and recalling those experiences you had with EUAs, with the medical treatments of actual sick patients,
Right.
on an actual disease versus the boogeyman that, you know, what's really going on. Let me ask you about this. What are your thoughts on the diagnostics for these quote unquote viruses? What are your thoughts on, do you have any experience seeing the cycle threshold rates of the PCR tests or anything like that?
Yeah. So, okay. Back to the experiences again, PCR, how I was taught by an old physician was that you can't confirm diagnosis with PCR. It has to be confirmed with either like a full bacterial growth or something that you can identify, like, okay, let's just say
like a culture,
yeah, culture or something like that to confirm what it is versus just PCR.
Proper isolation, right? Like
correct.
The gold standard of scientific method, Cox postulate, or Rivers, right?
And the idea from it from a physician's perspective, because I'm not a physician, you know, IDCs are kind of like the PA lights, and it's like more from a perspective of that you have to confirm what it is so you know which medication to give properly, specifically like antibiotics or something like that. You kind of want to know what you're dealing with versus a generalized thing. But that's how I viewed coming in as a clinician, you know, as a former IDC, is like, for, you know, that's how I saw it the whole time. Is like, that's what PCR is for. So when it became the standard, it was like the what's the false rate to this? Like how many cycle thresholds are there? So I don't think I've really understood cycle thresholds until I heard Kerry Mullen's speech when he was talking about it with, you know, there's a famous video floating around the internet that talks about him and how he created the PCR test and how he spoke about how it can be weaponized based upon what you're looking for and how high that cycle threshold is, how many times those replications occur. And I looked like a crazy person in 2021 when I went up to a health director at our county school board meeting, and I looked at her. I'm like, "Do you even know what the cycle threshold is for the PCR tests that are currently going on?" And she's like, "I can find out for you." And I'm like, "You have no idea. It's over 35. It's like 90% false positives." You know.
So Department of Defense from the CDC, because I worked with a lab tech, an NCO 68 kilo in the Army down at Army Public Health Command Atlantic at Fort Meade. He was there running these PCR tests, these pooled samples, right? Not even singular samples. They were running pooled samples from like training grounds, like I don't know, like basic training at Fort Jackson or something, pooled samples, and they would run it at 45 cycle thresholds.
That's 100%. That's
And so
100% false positive.
it's wild. And then I mean, if you look on for the general public out there, now I see kind of these I see information coming out about measles, and they're always kind of prepping the groundwork, information domain or psychological domain, like, oh, measles, oh,
Well, we're dealing
monkeypox.
with
This
this. Right. Well, it's seen now in the livestock community because North Carolina right now they're using PCR to cull all the chickens. So we 3-4 months ago it was hard to find eggs in North Carolina because they were taking out all the flock based upon the
PCR,
PCR test looking
right?
for
So
avian flu.
that's the thing. It's like they legitimately, if you go online, you're like, hey, what is how do they diagnose measles? How do they diagnose this flu? How do they diagnose any virus, basically? And what do they say? Even the CDC on their website say the gold standard is PCR. It's like, no, it's not.
And it was
They're
because it
almost
was the only thing available too, but that's what they said, you know.
they're weaponizing Carrie Mullis's patents against the entire freaking world, essentially. And then another thing is, where do these laboratories buy the primers from, right? For PCR.
That's a great. So there's a company, BGI. I think it was in one of the Senate hearing committees or maybe congressional hearing committees. They came out and they found that BGI is a CCP owned company that is collecting Americans' genomics from the COVID tests. So everyone that went through and got those COVID tests, it's just, I kind of tell people it's just as important as your internet security and your stuff like that. It's your biomedical security is the next step, and you have to protect your DNA from that perspective. So, even when 23andMe was popular amongst us, like, I don't want to send, like, who's that going to? And I viewed it differently just because it's personal information. And if you're working in the field of HIPAA, you understand how important that is.
Yeah, they're not genomically sequencing a virus. They're genomically sequencing you, the human being,
100%.
and then in my opinion, but I'm probably certain at this point. There's plenty of evidence to probably back this statement up, but we'll call it an opinion at this point in time. They're then weaponizing biological warfare against your genomic sequence. And we've seen this where they were taking Slavic populations and doing the same thing. They were running the PCR COVID-19 on Russian. This is a study even found in the NIH open source. You can search this.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and dig it up. But Lisa McGee from Vax Choice, she's deep into this. But they were genomically sequencing Russian national population, right? And calling it, COVID-19 testing, right? Track the virus, but genomically sequencing, the population of these regions. I mean, for what? Like, really? I mean, and calling it under the guise of like, oh, an educational consortium of sorts, it's a study, it's like, I mean, we're talking about a quote unquote disease. I don't even want to give it that much credit, but with a like a, incredible survival rate. And I would argue that nobody actually died from COVID-19. They died from the protocol treatments, the weaponized treatments of
100%.
COVID-19 themselves. And so it's interesting because, and I've said it before, the jabs and the other things were third order effects from the weaponized diagnostics. But most of your doctors out there aren't actually focused on the weaponized, like in the freedom health movements, aren't focused on the weaponized diagnostics. They're still focused on third order effects, which I get it. Like, that's a huge deal because a lot of people got injured by these jabs, and I'm not casting shade on that. That's an important thing. But if we want this to prevent this from happening again, you would go to the head of the snake, and the head of the snake in my mind is weaponized diagnostics. I mean, even like cancer, for example, how many people, have they told that have cancer that didn't actually have cancer and then made immense amount of money on treating them for cancer, and then they didn't die from cancer, they died from the treatment of cancer. you know. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
It kind of exposes like not just the COVID aspect, but also like pretty much across the board when it comes to healthcare in the United States, or the standardization of it. It's just very much like, I think, that's kind of why I got into natural medicine, because I think so many people now are really not, I don't want to say questioning the narrative, but they're really taking, I'm a big, my big statement in my business is like, heal thyself. It's like, you have to be your own best advocate when it comes to your healthcare, especially with chronic issues. Like you could go see a doctor and do all this stuff, but the biggest thing comes down to you actually taking the perspective and changing it. But the weaponization too, it's like, so like the PrEP Act obviously gives them the coverage to weaponize everything, and that's like, I think to me that's what it goes up to, is like recalling or repealing the PrEP
yeah.
Act that was done after 9/11, and because that's, I don't know if you're following the case that happened here in North Carolina with the 13, 14-year-old boy that got vaccinated in Greensboro. Did you hear about this?
Mm-mm.
2021, when the schools, and this is something I was fighting when I was going to like school boards, our school board was one of the, I gotta give them credit, because we were one of the first counties to make mask optional, as crazy
Uh-huh.
as that sounds today. But that was a big deal in the state, because the state health department was going to the different school boards and threatening them with losing funding, fines, taking them to court for not following their NCDHS school like setup, how they wanted to have you masks, stay 6 feet apart, do all the weaponization of what we're talking about. That was what was going on. So point in saying all this is that it was talking about the weaponization, because now they wanted to start testing all the students when they come into school. Like, hey, now that we have mask optional, that's fine, but now we got to test you. I'm like, what are you gonna? They're like, well, some of the school board members like, well, we'll just train some of the teachers how to do the testing, and they test kids. I'm like, no, that's another diagnostic that I do not. I'm informed about it. I'm worried about the don't have to go into the details of it. I'm just saying no. It's like, it's an emergency use authorized product. Here's the law that covers that. And they ended up not doing that. But the boy in 14 years old, they were doing vaccination clinics in the schools, and they tried doing one here in our county, and we stood up against it. But the vaccination clinic, that having the boy showed up to get tested when he went into the school to get tested. Remember, at the time, parents couldn't go into the schools. So the 14-year-old goes in there. The clinic is running a testing and vaccination center. So they ended up vaccinating him. It was quoted in the court case as saying that one of the nurses being overheard as saying, just give it to him anyway. And he comes outside, tells his father they had been vaccinated and not tested. And the father's like, he didn't have consent. So they went to the Supreme Court here in North Carolina, ruled that it was a violation, even though the PrEP Act exists, it was a violation to their fundamental constitutional rights, which is a big case when you look at what's going across the nation. So the North Carolina Supreme Court did a good there, but it had to go all the way up to that. That was just decided, I think, like 2 months ago.
Oh wow. Yeah, no, I didn't hear about that. That's huge.
I'll shoot you the link on that. Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we're talking about, because the PrEP Act is the main coverage, that the liability that a lot of these court cases have been following, that I've been following,
Well,
that they've been using the argument.
yeah, at the end of the day, this whole thing is hiding behind statutes and corporate bylaws. It's not actual real law if you think about it, because none of it's actually constitutional. So
Right.
it's legalese, but it's not actually constitutional, and therefore, and even furthermore, for the people, it's yeah, it protects people going inside these public places, but at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to worry. You shouldn't have to. You should be able to stand upon your constitutional fundamental rights and not have to reverberate and regurgitate United States code like 21360 BBB that you must be given the option to accept or refuse. That's inherent. Like
Right.
that's an inherent thing you have. You and the fact that they did the whole bait and switch and just weaponized this. That's the crazy thing, is like, this is something I just brought up in the podcast I did with Sam Shoemate. It's like, the biggest governmental organization in the world, Department of Defense, just wrote down on paper, the Secretary of Defense just came out publicly, and they wrote it down on paper, that the orders were unlawful.
Unlawful.
So if it was unlawful for military service members in the Department of Defense, who else was it unlawful for? It was
100%, all of us, everybody.
all of
And
society.
that's kind of why Sam, I don't know if Sam had the Telegram channel or you did, or somehow I don't remember, because I don't really get on it. But now I look at it like, that's how I learned about what you guys were facing and how it also applied into the civilian sector, because nothing's really changed other than the judicial hierarchy of where it stops. It's just it's all the same laws, and it's 100% applicable to everybody.
Yeah, it was probably terminal CWO, Sam and
Probably.
his administrators working, and they're getting the information out among service members, but among the people as well. And I mean, it's a huge thing because we're dealing with a bunch of public servants currently walking around that knowingly violated the law, knowingly
100%.
violated. I mean, they're not, and a lot of them don't have the PrEP Act immunity. Like they're not under the PrEP Act immunity. Like they're
So
not
who's that? More manufacturers under, or because I
yeah,
thought hospitals fell under it too.
Well, I don't know, maybe the institutions, but the individuals themselves, they're not covered under this. I mean, if the ones who knowingly got served with the law, right, knowingly received protected communication, right? Hey, you must give me the option to accept or refuse. It's written down. And then they went on to retaliate against these service members or public servants, right? School teachers, police department. I mean, they lost their immunity in that act. Like if you could potentially say, I didn't know, right?
But you're informing them at that point in time to the law that they're breaking.
Right. But as long as somebody didn't bring them the actual law and literally serve them with it via email, via certified notice, via protected communications in a court martial, I mean, all the way up to even getting to that point, you can't say you didn't know. You knew. And so they're not protected. There's no way they're protected. So
that's interesting, because that's what I did at the community college when I was telling you, when we spoke earlier about trying to go and do this aquaculture thing. I had about a year remaining where I could still finish up, find another master's. So I had 3 years remaining of my GI Bill. So I was like, maybe I'll just do 1 year at the community college. I had just done this 12-week oyster farming class they teach at the community college. Really awesome. Like I enjoy it a lot. Like I wish I could, it's all I think about is I just wanted to be a clamor, So, I look back at it though, and so I did this online / in-person oyster farming school, and then I was like, I'll do a year-long aquaculture course, and that'll give me a broad understanding of how to grow my own oyster seed and clam seed, and then start a farm and just be more regenerative, but actually starting at the beginning too, instead of buying the seed. So, but the point is that weaponization, I understood it at that time. I knew they were breaking the law. And when they re-mandated the mask again on campus, and it was 3 days prior to school starting. So I was like, okay, this is going to be great. 2021, everyone's getting their shots. Go get your shot. Let's move on, please. I'm not doing it, but do what you got to do. And I'm going to go to school and do this for a while. And the school came out no, you got to wear a mask again. So, first day of school was kind of I put on a collared shirt. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I just walked in there the way I'm looking right now, and everybody was masked. Nobody was quote unquote resisting. And all the other students, they're younger. I'm an older guy, and they're all looking at me what's he doing here? Maskless. And the vice principal of the school met me outside the classroom, and she's like, are you Mr. Conklin? I'm like, yes, I am. She's like, can we have a talk? And then that's when we sat down. And so they gave me 3 options, either wear a mask and come to class, or you can go get a doctor's note. And they try to paint it to me like it had an option hey, but you can go get a doctor's appointment and you get a note, your doctor saying that you can wear a face shield. And I'm like, it doesn't work. I'm not. So you're telling me, that's what I asked him. I was like, so you're telling me I can not going to wear a mask, but I can be protected if I wear a face shield? That doesn't make sense. And I'm not wearing a ridiculous face shield. That's another product. I'm not going to do it. But they didn't want to do that. That's it. So then they said I can do online classes still, and then come in when nobody else is in there by myself and work on the fish tanks and not be exposing other students to my. I was like, oh, that's segregation. I'm not going to be segregated. It gets that. And it's just, I'm not going to wear a mask. And it's not only that, I told him as a disabled veteran, it gives me, I told him, I was like, it just makes me upset because the whole time I'm wearing, I'm like, why am I wearing this thing? It doesn't do anything for me. It's not going to work. I don't, it irritates me. So I'm not going to wear it. And that's, American Disabilities Act should provide me the ability to have my own, like, just let me, that's all I was asking for, make mask optional. There's no reason to mandate it, and there's no actual law. And that I've referenced the law and saying it was never, 21 U.S. Section Code states in there specifically that it's my informed consent. I'm informed, I know the risk, and I'm not going to wear it. And they're like, well, we'll let you know. So the next day I showed up with a sign that said make mask optional. And I sat there and I got so many people flicking me off, yelling at me, calling me an idiot. And I was like, started laughing because I was like, then I started doing probably what you've done at sometimes where you start quoting numbers at that period. This is 2021. So Delta variant's raging. And I started quoting numbers. And I'm like, I looked at the county health department's dashboard and the state's dashboard. We're not running out of ventilators. That's not true. We're also aren't overflowing patients. All that's being made up. And it's just, people were so upset with me holding a sign that said make masks optional. And the school came out and they had the security guards looking at me, but I stood in public, space. And I think the next day I sent another email just, telling them I'm not going to do it. And they're like, well, we'll disenroll you now, and then you can come return back once the mandates have ended. And so waited about 4 months, and I went to the board of trustees, sent them another letter, told them, hey, are you aware of this? It's breaking federal law. It was just because of the ESSER funds. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but the schools got money to basically, if they followed those mandates, they would receive federal funding from the CARES Act, and that if they didn't follow those rules, that they would be risk losing it. So I was like, is this a reason why I couldn't go to school? Because you were afraid of losing your CARES Act money? And never got a response, or they gave me a response saying that they're following the orders of the local health department, just doing their thing. But you know how it goes. It just goes in one ear, out the other.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like simultaneously they're breaking federal law, but at the same time receiving federal funds.
Right. And I'm just notifying them too. It was like, I wasn't, I try to go, like, nowadays it's like, I've realized that it's that Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12 kind of thing. It's like, it's not in the fight's not in flesh and blood. It's nothing personal. It's all in your mind and spiritual, in the perspective that you're not given God's goodwill to just let you live your life. If I say no, like, that's what we're fundamentally built upon on the U.S. Constitution, is that it's my individual right. It's not the collective's right to tell me what to do. It's my own individual right to make a decision.
Yeah,
that's the fundamental perspective of it all.
Yep. Yeah, and there was just the psychological warfare was, and it still is next level. It still
100%.
is next level, because I've been to places and they have no clue what's happened. They have no utter clue what's happened, because they've been psychologically operated on so incredibly badly. I mean, we all have, to an extent, for a long time, but it's like now it's
right in
bad.
your face. It's no denying it at this point. If you paid attention the last 5 years, I think everyone knows. They're having a hard time admitting to it, because it is kind of like a personal thing. If you fell for the whole lie the whole time, now you have to accept that it's been a lie for 5 years at least.
Well, yeah, now, it's a psychological, suppository red pill that people aren't ready for, and having an immense impact on mental health. And then they get put into a mental health system that is also weaponized with, these psychotropics that don't actually help anything. It's a band-aid, and worse, it induces the problems they're having to such a degree that a lot of these individuals are self-eliminating, know.
And it's the highest rate of suicide in the military that we've seen in decades. I think it's the highest it's ever been. And I kind of looked at a lot of this from like you said, the idea that you're being lied to and manipulated. Because, when you said that, try to tell people, it's like, when everyone knows me from the restaurant, I used to like pull people aside who were wearing masks, because they would come to a place where they're serving you without a mask. No one's wearing masks. No employees wore them.
And they would come in with a mask?
With a mask, order their food. We make it to them, give it to them without a mask. And then you see them, like, they serve like fresh margaritas there. They'll sit there, pull their mask down. And after like 3 or 4 margaritas, their mask is on the ground somewhere. They're having a good time. They totally forgot about COVID for that short period of time. And then they'll leave. And I used to walk around and find the masks that were left behind and pick them up with my finger and swirl it around and be like, ooh, it's like,
we got it.
Who forgot about the COVID? You got. So, but I've had conversations with customers, and I've told an elderly lady that, you don't know that you're being lied to and manipulated because you've been lied to and manipulated. We don't wear masks because the questions always came up. Why aren't you guys wearing masks? Why aren't you following the governor's mandate, his EO executive order? I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but what you should be following that. They would write bad reviews and they come in there and yell at us, and like people losing their minds. And I would
help the business out, didn't it?
Yeah, they're one of the top restaurants in Carteret County right now. It's a big, if you Google it, like it's a well-known freedom fighting. It's like, I'm telling you, it was like the Alamo kind of thing. It's a good place. So if you're ever in North Carolina, that's a pitch for Fish Hut Grill on Emerald Isle, North Carolina.
Fish Hut Grill.
Fish Hut Grill. Yeah, they serve fresh seafood from the area. It's kind of like a surfer. Everyone in there is like a surfer skater. So it's kind of like a cool hangout local spot. A lot of locals there, and there's always a huge line out the door. You'll wait at least an hour and a half to get in, but it's served fresh right there. It's made to order, and my son works there. I worked there for a while. It's been kind of a family staple for 5 years, helping out John and Sarah, who are the owners there, and they're big surfers. So we've kind of, when COVID hit, we all kind of came together, and I think that goes with my advice to everyone is get to know your community and where you live at, because I'm Floridian. I grew up in Florida, but I moved here in 2011-ish. And that was like I don't know anybody here. I was in the military, so I was always gone. And then once I got out, it was nice because I didn't know anybody. But at the same time, when something like COVID happens, it was really nice to have people, even if they're online like this, to kind of like reference and go on. But yeah, we stuck together with that. And Emerald Isle, there's a famous photo of my buddy Jim standing in the surf in his Navy chief uniform right when they did the lockdowns, because the island, you couldn't surf on the island for like 3 months, 2 months. They're like, no surfing allowed during the initial lockdowns of 2020. My buddy Jim, good Christian man, like he is my mentor 100%. He goes out there in his Navy uniform. He's a Navy chief, stands in the surf with a sign that says "Land of the Free." And he's like, I can go to the beach anytime I want. This is our beach. And the cops came out there. They didn't arrest them because they had just arrested 3 surfers previously, and it was like a big deal in the community. So they told him he's got to get out of the water.
It was bad optics, right? Arresting a Navy chief.
100%. It was on like one of the major newspapers in the national news caught it, and you can look it up. Navy Corpsman or Navy chief in water, Emerald Isle. It's a famous photo in there. But Jim. Jim was just basically fighting back that. So Emerald Isle became like a hub where we were able to open the beaches up. All the surfers got together. We protested out on the main highway there. Mayor came out and said, okay, we're going to lift the mandate. Let surfers go in the water. And their biggest fear was that we're going to spread the disease to the rescuers. And the surfers' perspective was like, we usually rescue more people than you actually come out and help. It's like, we'll be okay. We don't need your help, or you won't be hurt. Like surfing it's a right. So that happened, and then Fish Hut became like the staple where everyone kind of hung out at, and then it just kind of grew from there. So it's now awesome. Like a pretty cool spot. Yeah, good place, good people. And they're doing a Memorial Day walk on Monday. So what they do is, remember in 2020 and 21, people forget that a lot of these like celebratory Americanism events were canceled because of COVID, and nobody wanted to go out and do stuff. So I'm looking at it and talking with John, the owner. I'm like, hey man, like I started wearing like my old like unit shirts and stuff like that, and like trying to get more promote, because BLM riots were going on. It was racist to even wear an American hat. Like all that weird stuff was going on, and we started like just being super patriotic. All the Fish Hut boys, all the boys that work in the kitchen started wearing like "Don't Tread on Me" hats and stuff, or like motivating them, like don't go to school, don't wear a mask, get a waiver. You don't need to do that. Like became like a positive mentor influence when it became to like just standing up for yourself and just kind of taking
tyrants.
Yeah, be a little bit more punk rock. Like I just tell them, it's like, just be a little bit more punk rock. Like whatever happened, like I tell people, kids, I'm like, you kids should listen a little bit more like punk rock music, where you're just a little bit more like, let me individualism. Like that's, I think, the core of it all.
That's pretty cool. I remember my wife would look, and we'd look at restaurants where people would say like, oh, this restaurant, is terrible. They didn't have masks. It's like, oh, that's my restaurant. That's where we're going.
Yeah, let's go there.
Like,
I had people come up to us and go, we came here because we saw your 1-star reviews. This place is awesome.
We drove 3 hours to come to a restaurant. Yeah,
Mark,
I would too.
I'm telling you, think about like what was going on at that time. If you knew there's a normal place you can go to, it was like an escape.
I was in Maryland, and if I knew about it, I would have drove down.
Well, you're invited anytime. I'd love to meet you there. But
yeah, that'd be cool. That would be cool.
I think psychologically, though, that helped people more than I think people would ever realize. Maybe in the future they'll come to, like, your actions and what you stood for and what you did. It's gonna come. It's gonna come to light. It's gonna be looked at as something beneficial versus something of an irritant. And, how could he ever do that? And that's how it has been for, I can imagine. I mean, for 3-4 years, it's only recently now people are with this whole Maha movement, like, oh yeah, we're on your side. It's like, really? Like, I haven't had anybody I know who was on my side. And
Yeah.
that's
I
the
mean,
people who I know.
yeah, I mean, I'm not, hey, come on over, get inside the boat, right? I'm not gonna, but at the same time, I'm gonna know, we're gonna know. It's like, well, what happened to you during 2020 to 2023? Did anything happen to you? I mean, I'm glad you're here now. Get inside the boat. Let's row. Like, let's go. Right. But at the same time, I mean, where were you when, we were getting stabbed in the back? But, hey, get inside the boat. Let's row.
Well, there's a lot of animosity within the civilian sector too, because there was a lot of people, and it was like I was telling you earlier, it was like good Christians standing up and saying, no, this is our faith in God, and we're not going to give up our individual rights, no matter what the topic is. Vaccines, masks, mandates, whatever it is. They just stood there on the wall, and they were just, screamed at, yelled at, hated, and now it's becoming, oh, maybe they were right. And it's not making it easier. It's making it weirder, I think.
I mean, it's tough because it's like, I think people are going to be faced with a huge red pill. I mean, if they haven't already. I mean, how could you go this far and just not? I don't know. There is people legitimately, they're still this far and they just don't know what's happened. Like, they have no other clue. They, like, even people in the military, I've talked with people in the military, they have no clue the SecDef just deemed it an unlawful order. Like,
that's a big deal too.
They wrote it down on paper. In my mind, I'm like, holy crap. And it's like, nope, like, doesn't even, I mean, but at the end of the day, here's the thing. None of it matters if we don't have accountability. None of it matters if you're not, actually holding accountable the criminals that actually violated the law, that actually violated military regulation, right? I mean, they court-martialed me for not breaking the law, not violating military regulation, not even for actually legitimately showing up to perform my duties in which I was appointed at the place in which I was assigned for my official duties, that they refused. And even on top of my official duties, having to try to do risk communication strategy because theirs was pure propaganda and psychological warfare against service members. So it's like, okay, so we know accountability can be done. Like, you wasted all that money court-martialing me. Well, let's, spend the money and actually court-martial the criminals.
Has anybody involved in your situation ever apologized?
No. Nope. They've got promoted. And then you have Jenny Vinman, the staff judge advocate, who sent me to a court-martial, who had hands on my protected communication, right? The twin brother to Alexander Vinman, the whistleblower from Trump White House. Both of them got fired from Trump White House. He got sent to Aberdeen Proving Grounds to be the staff judge advocate, right? Sent me to a court-martial, bragged about convicting the first COVID-19 refuser in the Department of Defense, right? Now he's District 7, Virginia House of Representatives elected, sits on the House Armed Services Committee.
Crazy.
Yeah, so no, of course they didn't apologize. They think, lawful orders, Article 92, you follow orders. Yeah. Lawful orders. Yep. But they weren't lawful. They were unlawful, but
and you were at 17 years at that point. 17 years, lost your retirement as well.
Yeah, 17 years. Yeah, it was like 17 and a half years. They gave me, they called me up one day and said, hey, you got 14 days to get out. 17 years, 14 days to get out, clear the army and get out. Like, oh, all right, Roger that. I'm not signing your paperwork. I'm not signing my DD 214. I'm not consenting to this. It's unlawful. In my mind, I never left.
Have they
Still
reached back
actively
out to
serving.
you? Has the military reached back out to see if you want to come back in?
No, I haven't got any official paperwork. No. I have a
I've been
board of
following that, but I'm just not familiar with how the. I know there's a lot of people on X that are tweeting out their letters that they're getting and the notifications they're having. Hey, come back in, but they're not
so
rectifying anything.
what's interesting is I know a lot of service members who, quote unquote, I use that term loosely, voluntarily left and got the letters. They didn't actually voluntarily leave because nobody actually voluntarily left because of COVID. They were coerced. They were,
Right.
backed into a corner. But those individuals who are coded as quote unquote voluntary, they got letters, right? But myself and the involuntary, we haven't got nothing. But I have a case with the Army Board of Military Corrections. I have a case number now, so I don't know how this is gonna play out, but all I'm saying is I've got evidence. I've got a list of names of officers who actually broke the law. So, I would hope that we go through and adjudicate that and give them due process, right? Because I had due process. They deserve due process. And if the due process finds out that they actually committed the law, then they should serve, a sentence, whatever that may be.
Do you think that will set precedents for the civilian sector? Excuse me.
Absolutely.
Not precedents, but at least they show it, and it becomes a national conversation.
It's going to have a trickle down effect. I mean, again, it goes back to those a lot of people too believe they actually took a FDA approved injection. Like they actually believe that because they did the whole bait and switch deal. Right. And then nobody actually batted an eye to the mask and test, and those fall under the same laws. It's no different. Like they're three of the same. Masking, testing, injections fall under the same statutes. So if you were discriminated against in any way, and these mandates were weaponized against you, and you weren't given the option to accept or refuse, that's the big difference. The option to accept or refuse. Why? Because that's an option. That's no longer a mandate. You can't mandate an EUA. And that's why you must give the option to accept or refuse. The individuals informing that those products are available for emergency use, right? Hey, I just want to let you know we've got these injections available. If you would like to, you can participate, but you don't have to. Right? That's how you do it. It's just simple. It's like when I was commander, before the mandates rolled out, it was optional. And when I was commander, I was like, I put an email, make sure, first sergeant, make sure these soldiers understand it is optional at this point in time. Because at a certain point in time in the military, like a lot of the leadership's mind went to like, before it was even mandated, we're gonna mandate it on our own.
Mandate it anyways, yeah.
Right. You know how it is being in the military. It's like, some of these commanders, first sergeants, and
we're gonna be the first ones. Yeah.
Hey guys, it's not mandated now, but it's gonna be. It's coming. That was the line. Yeah. It's coming. And I'm over here like, no. You make sure you tell them it's optional, like flat out optional. And then the mandates came, and I was like, well, okay, well, where's the FDA approved product? Oh, it doesn't exist. Oh, yeah, okay, no.
And my wife didn't have any type of recourse, or it was like you have to go get it and upload it into the computer system and send it to the school program for her to get her clinical site. And so she was at the point in school she's always wanted to go to Northwestern. I picked Northwestern off of Google because I looked for the top counseling courses, and I was like, Northwestern, let's apply. So we both applied, got into the same cohort, but she's looked at it as like, this is my dream school. I've always wanted to get to Northwestern. I'll take the student loan out to go to school and get, a degree from Northwestern. It's Northwestern. And I'm like, yeah, Northwestern. But she was told, you have to do it. And of course she moved down here in the middle of 2020. So she knew where I stood, and she was the same way. She was in Chicago at the time, listening to people bang their pots and pans outside the window for all the healthcare workers. Every night at 8 p.m. they would clap and then pound their pans and talk about psychological warfare. But they were out there doing that, and so she comes down here in Eastern North Carolina on the beach. It's like,
Chill.
hey, yeah, hang out, man. It's like pirates used to hang out here. Like, you'll be all right. So it just, once it was going online though, and then she had to go do a clinical rotations to go see clients and patients or whatever. So she talked to the site she was going to work at, and they told her that, we don't require it here in the state of North Carolina. You don't have to you don't have to get a shot because the state doesn't require it at the time. And she didn't have to do it, but the school was like, well, to stay in the program, you have to. So it's the administrator at the online aspect. I'm telling her nothing to do. I could understand, not really, but you know what I'm saying. I could understand the site being like, hey, we require to have it. That's great. That's between her and the site. But when the site is like, no big deal, and the school called the site, the clinical site, and was like, she can't go down there. She's not vaccinated. And they spilled her HIPAA from there. And then
Wow.
she was kind of using the perspective as just her 14th Amendment. There was no reason for her to get a vaccine to come into school. Why is it now required for me to stay in the program? And they got to the point where the program didn't want to talk to her anymore. She has to go through the lawyers, and this is where they stand to get the shot. So she's now sitting on a lot of student loan debt, and she's pretty broken. I mean, it really broke her because it was like a moral injury, like anything else. Everyone went through some point in time where they got broken, and they were just more in that phase of like being in shell shock. Like, I can't believe they're doing this. And when you would go tell people around you, can you believe they're doing this? And people look at you like, well, figure it out. And you're like, no, this is, you're changing my life's direction. It was her dream to be a therapist, and meeting me and working with my friends who are needing people to talk to. There's a need to. I mean, we're in a mental health crisis. Like, why
Yeah.
could they not understand that it was her own individual right? And it was completely mind-boggling for her. But yeah, that was everyone's gone through those experiences.
We're in a serious mental health crisis. I believe that we're going to need detoxification sites for the individuals who are actually currently in the mental health system because they've been toxified with the psychotropics. So I believe we're going to need actual legitimate detoxification sites to help those people out, because these psychiatrist asshats who hand that out like candy, right?
Yeah.
As a first resort, not even talking to their patients, not even a holistic view, not even understanding, but just slinging these psychotropics, SSRIs, and whatever. You're literally toxifying this individual, and there's no actual way. Like, they're not detoxifying them, to my knowledge. They're not.
I was telling someone the other day, it's like, I know more people now at this point, Memorial Day coming up, but like, I know more people have died from suicide now than I probably do from combat, like personally. And that accelerated in 2020. And that's kind of what got me really, because I'm studying psychology. It's the field I was in. So I looked at most of everything was going on with the lockdowns from a psychological perspective and what it does to people when it was clearly not appropriate legally nor ethically. So when I started seeing now kids I used to coach, I coached my son's t-ball team, baseball team here in the local field, and I was like an assistant coach. I was active duty, so I could do what I could. But I came to know a lot of the kids that ended up going to middle school with him and high school and all that. So seeing them suffer, and my son, he went through a pretty heavy depression during all of it, because they took away baseball, they took away the parks, they took away their ability to meet up with friends. Because remember, friends weren't wanting to hang out with certain friends because they knew they didn't vaccinate, or they didn't get they don't wear masks and stuff. So they started slowly separating the community. And I'm seeing, my son's telling me stories about kids who were trying to OD off the SSRIs, or they were trying to OD off their prescription medications, or they were cutting themselves. And I'm hearing this go on in our small community, because we're a pretty small community. And I'm like, this is going on nationally. So I started looking it up, and then there's like the North Carolina, I can't remember what the whole organization is, but it's the Psychiatry and Psychology of Adolescents in North Carolina. It's like a assembly of people, but they put a letter out in 2021 saying we're in a mental health crisis. Kids, like, ERs are being filled with kids coming in there with mental health issues. And I was like, okay, I can use my background, my schooling, and my research capability, and really present this in a way that would make, you try to use that reason and logic that doesn't really go well when people are completely brainwashed. But
Yeah.
just like you're in, here's the infection fatality rate for children. Like how many kids die in North Carolina from COVID? Not because of COVID, because they had pneumonia or something, some sort of insidious, like something else. Like what was it that COVID killed? And they couldn't put a number on it. And I know that Department of Health couldn't do it when I asked them at the school board meeting, but it's like I think it was like 7 at the time, 7 kids had died from COVID, and that they could document, and it showed in their North Carolina paperwork, the reports the preliminary reports they were putting out.
After they failed to actually treat them properly.
Right. And then they didn't say, and then that's still debatable too. It's like, what was the kid there for?
Like, what did he actually die from?
Right. And that's
same
the thing,
with service members. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, like, seeing what you guys were reporting on there and what was going helped me out and understand what was going on, because it just didn't make sense. So I knew what VAERS was going into, and I was taught VAERS school and IDC school, because anytime you give like yellow fever or any of those really high incidences of allergic reaction, you got to do it either in port if you're on a ship, or with a unit, you got to be at your home station. You can't do that overseas. I can't get yellow fever overseas because of the cardiac issue. But
interesting. So wait a second. You were trained in submitting VAERS reports.
Yeah, we trained that in IDC school, Surface Force IDC school at San Diego, California in 2010. Talked about VAERS specifically and using it if you had a vaccine reaction, adverse reaction. So I knew about the system then at that point. So that was kind of the question in 21 when they first started rolling out the shots. And me at the time, I never fell for it. So I'm watching people get vaccinated. I'm like, come on, don't do it, man. And then I'm looking at the obituaries following like 14-year-olds randomly dying in our area. It's a small community, 77,000 live in our county, and I'm watching this go on in 21, and I'm like, man, how can we notice? Look at VAERS. So, there's people here, once I got into the medical freedom movement in North Carolina and met other people who were same interest as you and I, they started doing their own research and compiling numbers, and like, hey, yeah, this is it, and this is what's going on, that we could see. Because I even offered my services to the health department, like, hey, you give me access to the system, I'll go in there and take a look at what people are dying from and get you a good report, not from some analyst up in Raleigh. Like, let me look. It's our community. Why not? That's the thing. I think someone made a post about that the other day where they're like, how many veterans during COVID reached their hand out to their local government? Like, let me help. Let me use my skills, my little knowledge that I have, even offered to I came up with the idea of like doing combat pill packs for the whole community. So I did a presentation to the Carteret County Department of Health and Human Services. They're like little community meeting they had. I did an open 5 minute, I think they gave me 7.5 minutes, but I did a con-op on how we could stop the pandemic by providing combat pill packs, but instead of having meloxicam and Tylenol in there, we would put ivermectin, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, D3, something like, or even adding
like a Z-Pack, like a Z-Pack.
Yeah, like a Z-Pack, but it would be like the basic nutraceutical that you could use to reduce hospitalization that Pierre Corey and the FLCCC were talking about. Yeah. And I was like, hey, they were doing that in other countries, so why not do it in our community? And dude, they looked at me like I was crazy, like absolutely nuts. And it was a great PowerPoint. I was pretty proud of it because I built it in like a week, and I briefed it in 7.5 minutes. I was like, yeah, heck yeah, it was really good. And it was like you told me too once on Instagram, you're like, you know what? It's because you showed the cure. It was the cure. If they would have given everyone in this county those early treatment packets, even if it was just vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, and D3, that is a treatment that they would have to sign off. And so that would take away the whole EUA. So now they can't use this shot anymore because it doesn't have the licensing capability, because there is a treatment that exists.
Well, and that's why they came out so hard against Trump back in April of 2020 when he came out about hydroxychloroquine, because at the time hydroxychloroquine did have an EUA, right?
100%.
But they had to discredit it. And so they went so hard with the PSYOPs to discredit it and weaponize it, right? They got rid of that because they needed an absence of an EUA to bring forth an EUA, because there can't be another EUA in place for the treatment of that. And so they wouldn't have been able to bring forth a jab because we had hydroxychloroquine. I remember I was the commander, Army Public Health Center. I reached out to the director. I was like, hey, is the Army looking into possible because I'm medical.
Yeah, where's the treatment? Right.
I'm medical entomologist. Remember, you go overseas, what do we take? Hydroxychloroquine, your prophylaxis for insect vector-borne disease, right? Which are debatable biological weaponry. Anyway, side note. So I was like, what's the deal? Are we looking into this? Is the Army looking into using hydroxychloroquine as a treatment potentially for service members? No, not effective. I was
Dude,
like, and then I got sent like the New England Journal of Medicine study that was totally fabricated, right? And we know this now. Like they came
yeah, I
out
think
and
it was the
said
one where they didn't add zinc to it, and they also I think it was just all
it was
falsified,
just
basically from
falsified. So
data.
that's what they fed, and we're just waiting for a vaccine. And at that point, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what's going on here. And then I came across the risk communication strategy, and I was like, yo, this is straight up propaganda. I was like, because it was like, tell them the risks of not getting vaccinated. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, where's the risks of getting vaccinated? Because currently we've got the VAERS database. And just like you said, you were trained in submitting VAERS report as a Department of Defense personnel, medical personnel in the Navy, right? And so I was curious because I was at Army Public Health Center, like, where's the database? Because I was doing risk communication strategies for vector-borne disease. So I needed access to the database to show the numbers on what was going on in certain regional locations. So I could write a somewhat accurate
assessment.
assessment. And they couldn't give it to me. And I was like, okay, well, when this whole popped up, that was kind of for entomology, and medical entomology and vector-borne disease. But when the whole vaccine thing popped up, I was like, what's the database that's reporting the adverse events? Because I knew we had VAERS, but I just needed to confirm that it was a Department of Defense official database that's being used, right? So I contact Colonel Tanya Rands. I was like, hey, Colonel Tanya Rands, like, through an official request for information, what is the database we use? It's VAERS. I'm like, okay, roger that. Hey, Army Public Health Center, you're missing the VAERS data on your risk communication strategy. And they just totally kept on ignoring me. And I was like, oh, roger that. And then Colonel Teresa Long came along and I saw her report and she's like, hey, check out this database, DMED. And I'm like, where's this database been? I could have used this for vector-borne disease.
You had a known do you have a known DMed before that? What was that, December 2020 when she did testimony?
Yeah, so she did testimony September 2021. December, I started talking with her about DMED, and she goes, yeah, like, it's a database. It shows the X, Y, and Z. It's not PII, right? And I was like, interesting. I'm like, why am I hearing this from a basically a frontline medical officer down at Rucker when I'm at Army Public? Why aren't they telling me about
You
this
should know this. This is
to
kind of your
perform my
spot.
official duties? And so I log into the database and I'm like, this is incredible. I obviously saw all the huge signals with, you remember in October, it was October 22nd, 2020, the FDA accidentally released an adverse reaction slide to the jabs.
Yeah, it was like slide 19 within the FDA thing.
It was,
I remember saying that. Yeah.
slide 16 or 17.
Something like that, yeah.
So I pulled all the codes for those ICDs, and I was like, holy crap. But at the same time, from medical entomology standpoint, I was like, no, this database is legit. Like, I can finally see what's going on geographical locations on vector-borne disease as well. And I'm like, why didn't they tell me about this? Like, why am
I knew of DMED probably like 2017, 18, because I was working at the School of Infantry as the medical chief, and we were watching heat strokes, heat cases, a lot of strep throat, a lot of like cellulitis, or I was kind of like looking at like, well, what is our true numbers? Like, what's the biggest thing that affects our population when students come in and they're being exposed to everything? And that's when you kind of should shape your mitigation strategy when it comes to infectious disease, you know? So a lot of cellulitis and a lot of strep throat and VGE stuff. So viral gastroenteritis. So you're kind of like, if we have to report that, what I would assume you should get those numbers as where your department would work at, if not in vector-borne, but just knowing what's going on, because it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling other people, I'm like, this needs to be in the hands of all your, basically anyone who's running medical risk communication strategies at the unit level. Like, push that to the unit level so they can run their own risk communication strategies, and you're not waiting for some centralized entity to push down information that doesn't come for like months on end, when you could individually have your units run this information like, hey, we're going to this location, what's going on at this location, pop up the numbers. All right, then brief your service members, let them know, hey, this is possible, like that. But it I don't know.
I think that's the sad thing, is that you were doing exactly what you're supposed to do. And I took that same philosophy when it came down. Is like, what's the risk, the benefit of, let's go with lockdowns, masking, and then testing, and then now vaccines. But I was against them from the beginning. That was a no comment. But it was weird because people understood your concerns, but they didn't understand the implications of it all, because it was so great that it couldn't be true. Like,
yeah,
you
you essentially had to flip your world view on its head, and then
100%.
and then you had to be able to rationalize the fact that your government is actually attacking you right now, like you're under attack. And it's
Right.
like, no, like this would never happen. It's like, no, it's happening.
Oh, it's happening. Yeah, it's already happened.
But you need, like, nobody understand, like nobody was willing to entertain the acts of war that were committed. Like the attack on the election system, which is national security infrastructure by foreign adversaries, that's an act of war. And then what happened after that, the weaponization of the injections, of the masking, of the testing, weapons of war, right? And so it's like, and then the psychological warfare on top of that. And from my perspective, I treated it all like a evasion after capture event, because of the acts of war that were committed. I was like, no, like, I have to act accordingly here. And here's what's happening. Here's what's coming down. And wow, like, they're being belligerent right now because they're not even acting legal, lawful, moral, ethical. They're not even following military regulations. Like, they threw it all out the window. And I'm like,
it seems so un-American and unconstitutional from the get-go. It just really made me kind of like, I don't know.
It was a
It made me
foreign
really
attack.
like, and it's a foreign attack that we have to look at it from the perspective, we got to defend ourselves. And how you use it is you use the Constitution as it's written as your defense weapon. Like, stand up for yourself, even if no one else is standing up, and base yourself upon what you've learned. I was out at the time, but I still, like, I have so much dedication to my country that I don't think people realize that's where it's coming from. It's just a concern for the general population and just trying to warn them, like, hey, it's not a good idea to do. What's topic do you want to talk about? Shots, vaccines, vaccines, shots, masks, putting on your children, making them wear a dirty diaper for 7 hours a day in school and falling asleep, and then having no social structure and going back to an abusive house. Like, people need to wake up and realize, like, it's been terrible to what's happened to the American people. And if I don't know.
It's complete warfare. It was complete warfare. And we saw service members stand up, but we saw a lot of service members that didn't stand up. We saw the people stand up. We saw a lot of people that didn't stand up. I equate it to, patriots. Like, we saw the patriots stand up and defend the country, and continue to do so to this day. And then we saw others who aided and abetted the foreign enemy. And
100%.
it's like,
And that's what's as interesting coming into, like, looking at it from the political perspective, is that the people who I expected to stand up and say something, the leaders, like, your perspective was military at the time, and now mine was from just the people who are running our local, state politics. You're coming to them with this information and telling them this is truth. Now we know it's truth that more children had died from suicide in 2022 in North Carolina from the ages of 10 to 14. That was the number one killer for kids in 2022, was 10 to 14 was suicide, not car accidents, not drownings, suicide. That's 10 to 14-year-old. So, you go in and tell someone who's a quote unquote legislative leader who could stop all this, or, you know what, don't even stop it. Let's just have an open investigation and have a hearing. We couldn't, in North Carolina, we couldn't even get a single hearing in with our state legislators. And we were a Republican supermajority. The Republicans were running the show at the time. They had a Democratic governor, but Republicans ran the legislators, and they refused to have any type of hearings on it, to just have the conversation. And that's that's what really blew my mind, is like, I just couldn't believe how no one seemed to want to actually stand up and say something. You're right. It was a very small percentage of people. And it's not that I have animosity. I'm just more in the sense of like, just disappointed in the fact that, like, Americans are the most privileged people on earth, to be honest. I think they've been given a lot of freedom that they didn't have to work for, that previous generations did, and we've kind of taken advantage of it. And now we're getting the secondary effects of that lack of knowledge and lack of standing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the huge thing. The education system's been dumbed down for so long. Nobody actually knew, I mean, it's been trial by fire, where how does somebody actually stand up for their individual unalienable rights? What does that
It's not
mean?
easy. Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable at all.
Yeah, what does
When it
that
came,
mean? And what is the Constitution for? Is it really for the people, or is it your form of government? It's for your form of government. It's not for the people. It's your form of government. It's for you to like, that's the box you put your government in. It's the Constitution. You've got
right.
unalienable God-given rights that are beyond the Constitution, but in the public sector, in the public arena, as your form of government, that's the box we put them in. And it's like, we even went even further and said, hey, you can't in this case, you can't weaponize these products, because you must give them the option to accept or refuse. And they freaking failed that too. It's like,
Yeah,
that's why I go back to foreign belligerent occupation. I mean, it was an act of war. It was an act of war. And when that comes out and continues to come out, that there was an attack on national security infrastructure, United States of America's election system, which is national security infrastructure, it'll be clear that the foreign belligerent occupying power got installed January 2021, and hence the reason why. And that was like the second act of war. The first one was probably the weaponized pandemic, whatever you want to call it, biological warfare activities, right? And then that one, and I think when it all comes out, that's exactly what it's going to be, a foreign occupying power that got installed. And if you weren't doing what you were supposed to as a public servant, you may have knowingly or unknowingly been aiding and abetting that foreign occupancy and that foreign infiltration instead of standing up against it. Some, potentially committed war crimes. And I think that's going to continue that truth is going to continue to get highlighted as we go forth.
I'm kind of wondering what would be the first step to get that. Like, how many? I think I read a statistic when they were saying about 1% or 2% of the population has the uptake of the COVID-19 vaccine right now. It's like 1 or 2% of the population is currently still getting up to date. However many they tell you now, COVID-19 shots. But just to me, I use that as a gauge of. I mean, it was 75% of the population took at least one shot. So now we're to the point that no one's really taking it. But it goes back to what we were saying before. It's hard to admit, and in psychology, I think they would consider it like cognitive dissonance. It's like where the truth is there, but it's difficult to swallow it, because it's like, it's better to live in bliss and ignorance than actually sit down.
And what I would say to somebody who might be watching that's gotten this far in this podcast is that, and they've been lied to, and maybe they feel ashamed about it. It's like, don't feel ashamed that you've been lied to and now you're coming awake, because we've all been lied to and we've all been asleep at some point in our lives. And we all have our individual experience with coming awake to the truth and what's really going on here. So it's like nobody's above another person another man or woman in this experience and what we're dealing with here. It's like, get in the boat and let's start rowing. It's
one of those things, like you said, it doesn't affect you until it affects you. Like, no one really listened to your story and what was going on and what you were refusing until they had to actually go through it. And I think once I started seeing people who I knew personally who got the shots, and then they had like what I would consider an adverse event, or if they even like said that, hey, well, after I got the shot, my heart rate went up to 170 every day, even at resting. And I was like, that's a vaccine injury. And once they kind of really set in, they're on board. But look how far it had to go now they injected themselves with this bioweapon. And once I started seeing people with injuries, I started to become a little bit more graceful for it too. It's like, this is not a judgment between me. I'm not fighting you. I know you're not coming at me with a shot or making me do something. I'm just letting you know that, like, I'm on the side of trying to help you out. Like that. That's goes back to what I was saying before. It goes back to, like, I'm just trying to look at what's best for the community. And if it's my community being just my people who I know, I'm going to speak up and say something. If it's your community where you're representing the military, like I don't know. I think once the injuries came, I think grace came in about, where it's not about shaming you or anything like that.
Yeah,
So if anybody got the shot, it's just,
it's like, I don't care if you participated with it or not. It's like, the fact is, like, to even get to that point, like, there was an immense amount of intense criminal warfare activity going on. Like, you should have never been at that point to even have to get to a position where you had to make that choice to accept or refuse something like this.
right.
But if you did, like, okay, like, can we start the healing process? Like, there is a healing process. I do believe that. I do believe it starts with God Almighty, Jesus Christ, first and foremost. And I believe, the submission to his will allows the individual to see the path in which they need to take for healing. And I believe, I believe even those individuals who did participate, they're able to be healed, by divine power, or a submission to God Almighty, and then going down the road of discernment, God-given discernment, to figure out what's actually right for their healing processes, versus turning to a very demonic medical system that actually profits off your destruction.
I mean, they got them there in the first place.
Yeah, and then when they've profited off your destruction, well, then they kill you, because they sucked up all of your life force energy with your insurance plans, and they
100%.
drained them. And it's like, oh, okay, well, stage 4 or stage 9 in Joe Biden's situation, right?
I mean, there's just so many people around me now that are coming up with, that I know and talk to, that are recent diagnoses of cancer, stage 4, people who have had pulmonary embolism, active duty members who, were forced to take the shot and they just followed the rules. They're just like normal people. Like, I'm not trying to make a stain, and they now have pulmonary embolism and they're on blood thinners for the rest of their life. And it's been equated to other things, everything but the shot.
Yeah, I just went to a good buddy of mine, first base. We were at first base together over in Japan. He just died of brain cancer. 37
How
years
old was he?
37 years old. He was an E8 in the Air Force, active duty. Got brain cancer about a year ago, like springtime 2024, and just passed away March 1st. And then I was talking with another Air Force former, he stood up the mandates, they kicked him out. He was telling me about a friend he knows, also active duty military, brain cancer. He's currently dealing with that. And then another one who actually went to get MRIs because he's concerned about something. I don't think the healing process is in that medical system. I think these individuals are healable. I just don't believe it's in this medical system. I believe the protocols lie outside, kind of what you were talking about with the holistic type medicine. I believe it's, submit to God and ask for discernment, and go about the holistic, homeopath, naturopath type way of treating. Do your own research. But there's a lot of fear in that,
there's a lot of unknown, and that's kind of where I like to help people and guide them through. Like, it's not so much to sell you a product or tell you what's going on. It's like, figure out what would work for you. And there's a lot of naturals. I mean, actually, one of the first detox protocols that was published by Peter McCullough, he specifically talked in there, they're all nutraceuticals. So nattokinase, curcumin, bromelain, and that was the first like real detox from the spike protein that was available, and it's all nutraceuticals. So I think that's kind of setting a standard now, and I've shared that with my instructors at school when we're doing clinicals for herbalism. We're seeing clients and we're talking to people, and one of the clients that I observed, was a woman, like after she got her Moderna shot, she immediately had electric feeling in her whole body. Like she felt like she was getting electrocuted every few seconds. And it went on for years. She's seen everybody. And she ended up in a herbal clinic practitioners, and we're observing as observants. And I'm listening to her story and her intake, and she made that equation to the Moderna shot, and 1 week later having these, or immediately afterwards, I don't know if it was a week, but it was immediate that she referenced it. She's like, immediately after that shot I started having it, and then I got the second one and it got even worse. And I'm sitting there going, that's a vaccine injury. And so all the other students involved, nobody looked at it as a vaccine injury. They're just solely focused on the symptom. I'm like, what can we do to help her with the symptom? I'm like, go back to what caused it. And so I shared that Peter McCullough's study, where I'm like, here's one study that's published that talks about bromelain and natural pharmaceuticals that you can buy anywhere on Amazon, and you can look at that study and follow that protocol that he put up there, and that's a natural protocol. So in the Bible, it talks about you know, the healing of the earth comes from, and the healing of the nations comes from the plants that we have. And if you look at the history of it, how it was presented to us, it's always been in a quackery kind of thing. But if you actually look at medicine in a historical perspective, how do we get to the medical system that we have today? And then you look back to what happened when the Flexner Report came out, I think in 1913. The Flexner Report was funded and pushed by John D. Rockefeller with Standard Oil to bring in the petroleum-based pharmaceuticals. That's now like well known.
Yeah, where like you're saying, where the naturopath and the homeopath at that point flipped to quackery, right?
100%.
Whereas before I mean, there's books about it, you know, the vaccine, running from the vaccines, you know, 1800s. And then the petroleum based, all that stuff. Modern day medicine is actually the quackery. You know?
Yeah, this anti-vaccine / anti-mandate stuff all occurred during the first pandemic of 1917, 1919.
Well, it's ironic too that the monetary system went on the 1913 central banking system.
Falls in the same timelines.
You know, all that stuff falls in the same time, and it makes sense because you do need people sick to liquidate the system, to liquidate the monetary system, because it's a debt-based fiat monetary system, and you need it liquidated. And the best way to do that is just keep people sick and keep on pumping out garbage products and X, Y, and Z, and just perpetuate, destruction so you can rebuild, and then it liquidates the system. I mean,
yeah, it's being exposed. So more people are definitely becoming aware of this. And I was just talking to someone today who told me the same thing. She, perimenopausal, having some menopausal systems. She was always kind of natural perspective, and she's like natural light, I guess you could say. And she goes to the doctor to see what help she can get. And she's like, I just went in there with an open mind to see what they said. And they just immediately tried prescribing her a bunch of medications, and she was turned off from it because they didn't offer any other solution, even starting with diet. Or what are you taking that it might be caustic to your body that is causing all these hormonal issues?
Yeah, because root cause analysis actually gets to the root of the problem. And if you're going to get to the root of the problem, you're solving problems long term. You don't have repeat customers. You don't have people coming back. They're not making money off you because they're solving root problems.
Right. And if you truly looked at somebody, it would be a longer, like, it's not a 15-minute consult. Like, this is multiple times you got to work with people and figure out what works for them from, just talk about diet alone.
A big thing that did it for me when I realized, like, oh, wait, we've got serious issues in public health. For 14 years, I did entomology and pest management in the Air Force. So I would go to facilities that had severe infestations of insects. I understood how to kill insects at a very like I did it for a long time. And so if you think about that, equate that to people, they're doing the same thing with people. What did I do when I went into a facility to actually solve a pest infestation? I went for the food sources that they were eating. I eliminated the food sources. I eliminated the water sources. I eliminated the harborage areas. And more times than not, I never actually had to use chemical, because if I did those three things, it wouldn't sustain a population to begin with. Translate that to the human population. It's exactly what they're doing to the human population. They're poisoning the water sources. They're poisoning the food sources. They're spraying chemicals, right, on
Yeah.
the food sources and in the air, right, with these chemtrails and everything else they're putting in the air. And then they're poisoning you with actual injections, actual neurotoxin injections. Whether you're eating them or you're getting injected with them. It's like it's weird. Like it's a weird. It's almost like Bug's Life. If you've ever seen it.
Yeah,
It's just weird. It's just weird because I did that for so long, and then I get over to the public health side and I was like, okay, well, what's the root cause of this problem? Right. And it's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, but what's causing it? It's got to be something, right? Like the food source, the water, this, like,
what's the root cause
no,
of
no,
it?
no.
Yeah, solve that.
We only care about the solution that we're going to put out here. And we don't care about the root cause because we're not actually trying to figure out what the real problem is. We only care about the fake problem, because if we understood the real problem, we would understand it not to be incredibly solvable, but it wouldn't make any money. It wouldn't sustain the public health type bloated apparatus, right? It wouldn't sustain jobs. It wouldn't liquidate the system. And so
I think the public health, when they didn't recommend like sunlight in 2020, and they just immediately told you to stay home, stay in your room, and their recommendations were so, I mean, it was horrible, as we all know, but like they didn't recommend sunlight. They didn't even talk about like increasing your vitamin C, checking your D3 levels, maybe quit drinking. What did they do instead? They like allowed the ABC stores to stay open as an essential business, but the gyms here, I know in North Carolina, they shut down the gyms and all the community centers, but the AB stores stayed open the whole time as long as you had your mask on. And that's where I was like, it's like, man, it was so flipped backwards, but I don't know.
when
I
you
try to
think
tell.
about it, like completely intentional, complete attack upon humanity, right? They're literally, if you think about it like bugs, that's how they were treating us, like insects.
Right.
And eliminating us like insects. Hey, we're gonna get rid of the D3. We're gonna psychologically manipulate them to stay inside and to toxify themselves, because their body's gonna want to detox from the lack of vitamin D and all this other stuff. So you're naturally gonna get sick, right? And then we're gonna keep the liquor stores open and everything else because that's poison. We know that's poison, and they're gonna love it, right? Oh man, it's so sick and twisted.
Yeah, it's you brought up earlier like when you kind of looked at the system differently, and I think for me is like once I traveled overseas and I saw what other countries, or not even countries because it wasn't a national thing, but how other people were treating themselves. So I did like a humanitarian mission in Ghana and Senegal in 2009, and we went out there as like a medical team. We had a couple Air Force dentists with us, an optometrist, I think it was Air Force, and then we had some Navy doctors, and I was like the leading corpsman for the medics that went, and we all got pulled together from all these different commands, flew out to Ghana, and we started treating people. Everyone had malaria. Like malaria was endemic there. It was like everyone had malaria. A lot of people had typhoid. And so we would line them up, dental over there, optometry over here, general health and wellness checks here. I took over with another physician doing pediatrics. So, kids would come in with high fever. We're in an epidemic. It's probably malaria. Send them over to go get their hydroxychloroquine. And also we were giving everyone out ivermectin. And that's when I first got introduced to ivermectin. We were giving them all, because no matter who came and saw us, they all got multivitamins and they all got ivermectin, just because it's like a care package. Like, thanks, there's nothing we can do. You have, leprosy. A couple people had some crazy like stuff we had to go look at books and figure out what we're looking at. So not much you can do, but here's some multivitamins and some anti-parasitic. So, but when I saw the alternative system is that we were giving out a lot of anti-malarial medications, and what the locals were doing is that they would thank you, and they wait in line for hours, take the medication, walk down a pharmacist down at a pharmacy that was in Ghana, sell back the medication we gave them, get the money, go get a plant called moringa. I'm sure a lot of women and people who take like a large it's like a multivitamin. It's got a bunch of nutrients in it. So moringa is a really good herb, but the Ghanaian people were taking the moringa and treating themselves with that for malaria, and they were cured for malaria, and they're keeping the money that they got from selling the medication we handed out to them, paid for by the government. So it got so bad.
Wow.
How we found out is that the
Wow.
pharmacist came over to our location because it was like our second day there. And he's like, please stop. I can't buy anymore. All they're doing is selling it. This is what they're doing. And I'm looking at the physician I was with. I'm like, well, what are we doing here? Like, this is so silly. What is that plant? They're like, it's moringa. And I kind of wrote it down and I took a mental note. And it goes back to like before we were talking, like, these experiences in life that God gives you, it kind of gives you like a glimpse of like, hey, and that's what I saw when it's like every time I was in a medic somewhere and I saw something happen, I was always interested in that ditch medicine. Like, so you telling me that I could use super glue to keep a wound cut, even though it might burn and it's not FDA approved and is dangerous one, but it could keep yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Let me try that out. Like, 'cause you find yourself in situations, especially in austere conditions in like Afghanistan, where you just got to figure it out. And watching, people over there doing, they started using herbs called like black seed oil. I saw
Yeah.
Iraqis rubbing their knees all the time with black seed oil. When I saw that early 2020, there's a study that came out of Pakistan where they were treating people with black seed oil as an alternative to ivermectin. I'm like, that's easier for me because ivermectin is a pharmaceutical that you have to get a prescription. You can buy it from India or how people were doing it, but to me, I was like, what's an alternative to anti-parasitic like ivermectin? And black seed oil was noticed in that Pakistan study. So I started giving my dad. He's got COPD. He's a merchant marine. He worked on ships. Like he smokes every day, loves his Marlboro Reds. But I was like, start taking black seed, Dad. It's kind of like a low grade like ivermectin. And nowadays we're looking at it as that's a cure all. I mean, it's even in the Quran as talking about as a cure all to everything except death by the quoted by the prophet. But I don't know. It's to me
Interesting.
That's what opened my eyes to a lot of these alternative medicines, because there's alternatives that are known out there. It's just that you got to understand the research is not going to be given to that, but there is good research out there that you can reference, and the traditional aspect that it's been used for thousands of years. And the Iraqis, I didn't know what it was at the time. They called it, I can't remember what the name is in Arabic, but they were rubbing it on their knees because I was working with those police training team. And there's an old man there. He was like in his 60s. We called him Father Time. I was like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be out here running and gunning with us. And he would rub his knees at night with his black seed oil. And he would always ask me if I could get it for him. And I'm like, this is olive oil. Like, I don't know what it is. All I have is a smell. And coming out, that's black seed oil. And now, when I saw it again in 2020, when I did that brief to the county health department, I was like, hey, if we can't do ivermectin, I understand the physician has to prescribe it. Let's just do black seed oil capsules that you can buy. They're super cheap and have it on hand. So if you get sick, instead of the old narrative that was going on at the times, like if you get sick, stay home. If you get really, really sick, go to the ER and die with remdesivir. It's like, okay, why not? If you get sick and you're sick, take this early treatment packet that just vitamin C, zinc, D3, and then maybe have some black seed oil in there that help out with that, and then go see your physician.
So is black seed oil like you can internally and external use?
Both, yeah, both are internally and externally. That's it's used a lot right now in like herbalism for PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. Like a lot of women are finding relief using black seed oil daily. I like to use it a lot of my products. I make some. I'm like an adult lemonade stand at this point. I make my own little products and I help people out. And I just, I'm a medic at heart, so I like to use black seed oil in a lot of my products topically. It's very good for the skin, and then internally too. If people have issues with like indigestion, any type of gut health issues, black seed oil is a really good thing. It's like diesel fuel, so it's hard to do, but you have to kind of use a carrier like honey. So traditionally in traditional texts, even in the Quran, they talk about taking the black seed itself and then putting it into honey, and then they found it in King Tut's tomb. Like he actually has it in there, black seed and honey together. So it's been known for thousands of years to be a combo. So my suggestion is anybody who's interested in doing black seed oil orally, use honey with it as a carrier, and it's been historically used as both like that. But it's a really good everyday nourishing thing. It interacts with a lot of medications, so that's one thing to look at. But it has a great medicinal effect to it. I love it. I tell people all the time, I'm like the black seed of I'm the Bubba Gump of black seed. I promote. I got black seed products. I got black seed hair gel. Like, what you need.
So you got this website, blackflag.info. US, right? Is
Yeah,
that
it's
right?
it's Black Flag Botanical Aid Station. So that
Black
I started
Flag.
Botanical Aid Station, but Black
Uh,
Flag BAS.US.
Flag BAS
Yep.
dot US.
.us. So instead of Battalion Aid Station, I turned it to Botanical Aid Station because about in 2021, I was, telling people about early treatment, what things you could do to help yourself. I was learning about nutraceuticals. I knew about nutraceuticals and like using NAC and vitamin C. So I started talking to people, and like I had a client who in North Carolina too. That's what's great about this state is that they're big about their. Yeah, it's not a great story. I don't have anything really to shop and buy for anybody. My biggest focus. If you go to the very top one there, to back to about. Anyways, my bio is like I like to do personal, like book an appointment. Go back up to the top, Mark.
Yeah.
And it
Yep.
says
Book
book
an
an
appointment.
appointment. Yeah, that's like goes to my bio. I do now mostly like personal one-on-one consults with people. So anybody with like chronic issues and stuff, they go on there, they schedule appointments, and then they're able to kind of link up with me. But it gives them like a quick bio and what I do.
Awesome.
But I do make products, but I don't really have any online right now because it's just I'm busy. So I like to do the working with people and chronic illness, subchronic issues is kind of my main focus.
Yeah.
Gastrointestinal disorders, autoimmune disease, just things that, and that's what it is. That herbalism is about providing food, and it's just expensive ingredients, but providing food that can help balance your body. And I've, take my perspective. I got 4 combat tours. I've been, I was a medic for 9 years, an IDC for 7, 8, and I have never been so successful when it comes to watching people help themselves, because that's really truly what it is believing in God and then also applying
Yep.
what he gave us that grows all around us, in a sense that you have to like the proper way of using it. And I haven't had such great success with anything. And I looked at it as like, man, this is why I didn't want to be a physician assistant, because I didn't want to get into the biomedical,
Get
seeing 15-minute
pigeonholed.
clients. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when I found this, and in the state of North Carolina, it has a very good natural health law that was put out in 2004. Is that if you're a practitioner in this state, you can just have informed consent. Yeah, informed consent of who I am, what I can do. Also, I can't like give you any prescriptions. I can't tell you to come off any prescriptions, and I also can't puncture skin, so I can't do acupuncture or anything like that, even though I've been trained in auricular acupuncture. But the thing is that I can definitely sit down with people, and that's what I like to do is just, hey, what you got going on? I've seen vaccine injured folks. I like using Peter McCullough's protocol. There's a lot of things you can do, and there's a lot of natural things that are available that I now look at it from if we are a foreign occupied, like you said, we have a belligerent government and our medical system has been completely taken over and our country needs help. Like this is the way around it, because it's a lot of like self-preservation. And I looked at it solely from that because the supply and medication pharmaceuticals, a lot of them are made in China. And once we start having these tariffs and that becomes an issue, Trump's already talked about that, specifically bringing in our pharmaceutical manufacturing back in
Yep.
here. But furthermore, let's go back to like figuring out what was using in the past and just quit drinking, quit eating seed oils, change your diet. That can exercise, start
Yeah.
getting some sunlight on your body. Like there's other ways of doing this. And I like to look at it. And that's what I do with clients is build kind of like a plan. It's a long-term thing. So I don't take on a lot of clients. I'm kind of picky who I work with because I like to work
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
people who want to like, you want to
Help
work,
them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to are open to helping themselves, open to new information at the same time, though.
Yeah.
Yep.
And again, most people are getting educated on it thanks to like social media and TikTok. Like I get a lot of people come up to me. It's like, I've heard about black seed, or I've heard about using NAC, or I've heard about using shilajit for this and that. And I'm like, yeah. And my job is to kind of help. I mean, I think I look at it like I tell my clients, like my job is just to basically point you in the right direction. I'm not going to bug you, but you need to really empower yourself and have faith in yourself and go research on this and learn
Yep.
what works for you and finding the right plant and protocol that works.
Is shilajit a mush? Is that a mushroom?
No,
What is
shilajit's an organic compound that is. I saw it when I was in Afghanistan in the mountains. I was up in Kunar in 2006. I was at the Marine Infantry Battalion up there. But then in the mountains and the Himalayas and all that, it's an organic compound that comes from rocks. It's called rock sweat. So when the
Oh,
rocks are
wow.
being compressed, it's all the minerals and organic substances come out. The main substance that's in it that's very it's been studied a lot is fulvic acid. So that's what
Yep.
people are kind of focusing. It's got a high fulvic acid and it has like 85 of your essential minerals in it. So it's like sea moss. So it's got a lot of
Okay.
magnesium. It's got a lot of good stuff in it that it comes as a resin, because what they do is they take that organic compressed rock. They process it down, make it into like a thick resin, and it's like cigarette smoke resin. Like it really does. It's very
Yeah.
organic-y, very resinous. But in Nepal and northern India, they mix it in with, and it's a carrier, so it uses a fat like milk. So you heat up some
Yeah.
water, you warm up the shilajit, and then you pour in some milk into it and you drink. And that's an old Ayurvedic way of taking shilajit. But I've had clients that came to me and they had low T. That's a common issue within 30-year-old, 40-year-old males in the military, is that everyone's got low T. Well, what's going on? So,
Yeah.
everyone's got low T, and he couldn't, of course, there's a big issue with taking testosterone while you're active duty. So I told him, I was like, just start some shilajit, take a larger dose. Like, most products you buy online off of Amazon will tell you to take pea size or a bean size amount in warm water and do the way I told you. But I told him, I was like, take a bigger amount of it and see what happens. It's been shown in some animal studies to increase testosterone. And he went from being in the 100s up to 500 within 4 months. And I
Wow.
was like, that's free testosterone.
What are your thoughts on people doing their own labs, getting their own labs, and kind of going that route versus the centralized model of? I mean, are there labs that people can do
And see where their
that
levels are at and stuff?
Yeah, that are more comprehensive than going into your doctor and getting labs.
I think the biggest one that you can get is like your D3 level, especially if you live up north. But personally, I don't rely on labs so much because I do a lot of energetics. So I kind of I do tongue exams. I try to talk to the person to see where they're at energetically, meaning it's kind of more of an old traditional way of doing things. Is if they're cold, if they're damp, if they're hot, if they're damp, if they're hot and dry. That's an old way of using the humors that they used to use back in ancient Greece to kind of balance people back out. So labs to me are great. I used to use them when I was, active duty. It's hard to get. They're coming more accessible, but I tell people to go see their primary physician, get their labs drawn, just so we can look at, cholesterol and the glucose and make sure there's no thyroid issues going on. But at the same time, I put a little bit of weight to it, but I also think of it from a whole picture perspective. What are you eating? What are your energetics? What's your tongue look like? And then what is it that you're looking for that I could find to help and balance? And, diets, and it's not so much like take and stop eating foods. Like I'm very much like a carnivore, going back to the original diet of high meats, high fats. I drink raw milk. North Carolina's going through they're trying to ban raw milk in North Carolina. It goes back to the PCR test because of avian flu, and that's a Republican doing it. And I'm like, what have we learned anything in the last 5 years? But
we really got to cut the head off that snake of the PCR test, because it's just
it's still being weaponized.
They're completely weaponized. It's, in my opinion, another pandemic's going to happen because the PCR test is still there to be weaponized. So
hasn't even been questioned yet by any of the medical freedom people. I think you're one of the few people that speak openly about the PCR. I'm always retweeting your PCR comments because I'm like a PCR guy too. I'm like, hey, we haven't even had the real discussion of how it's a fake test.
Yeah, if you want to talk about root cause, okay, well, let's go to PCR. Root cause.
That got us here. Yeah.
Wait a second. Viruses have never been properly isolated using a legitimate scientific method. No, they haven't. It's interesting that they call this the gold standard. And what's also interesting is Trump just signed an executive order mandating the government to go back to the gold. It's called the gold standard of science executive order. So it's interesting to me because his executive order makes sense, and it actually challenges the existence of PCR because PCR doesn't line up with the executive order. So is the federal government going to stop weaponizing the PCR test and using it as the gold standard for?
Yeah, I think when I started kind of getting into this and working with clients, it was very hard to go get labs drawn, and I didn't put too much weight into it because I just been doing this, for so long. And honestly, when you're around so many people, you kind of can pick up on energetics. I don't want to get too woo-woo-y about it because it exists, but it's also the amount of people I've seen over the years and all around the world. And I know Americans are unhealthy. I mean, you can look at them and say man, they're just not living well. And that includes psychologically, morally, and spiritually too. So, I just don't think that's given the primary care manager that you go and see when you're sick or that you need to get your labs drawn. Of course, your labs are going to be all over the place just because look at what you're eating. And that's why I'm saying it's like give weight to it, but it's also want to look at emergent things because there's no reason for me to give you something for your thyroid with an herb when clearly you have a hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism and you need to get followed up with a doctor for that. There's like antibiotics are great too. Like I think there's a absolute use for them, but that's what I kind of have this conversation a lot with people who, especially medical personnel who used to know me. And I'm like, I'm just basically adding the support that you wish you could do if you had the time to do it with a client or a patient,
I think that's going to become more and more important as we go
100%.
forth because the centralization of medical in general is just breaking down over the fact that they overplayed their hand the past, 5 years and just completely.
Not to get, but you were talking about SSRIs and suicide, and I know that you have a personal, alignment to that. I mean, obviously, but I saw that as well, and I questioned that, and that's kind of what got me more into like herbs and finding some. And when I say herbs, I'm talking like the American standard botanical from the pharmacopoeia that they've had prior to 1913. But that talked mostly about using like valerian root for PTSD. So when I read that the British military in World War II and the government was giving their citizens valerian root capsules to help them with blitzkrieg. So, excuse me, there's all these bombings going on. They're getting bombed by the Germans, and now they're finding a valerian root can help keep them calm. I'm like, well, why not? Why don't we ever hear about this when it comes to veterans who are not wanting to take medications, but they're just told to do other substances or SSRIs, and that's a lot of people who I knew who committed suicide in the 2021, 2020, and 23 area, 22 area. They all that I know of were seeing the VA, and they were all getting prescribed SSRIs because that's the standard of care. And I 100% contributed their suicide to the fact that they're probably unmanaged to
it. It's crimes against humanity for these psychiatrists that are handing these out indiscriminately. I mean, you're treating a patient, they're handing out these medications like candy, right? The warning is suicidal ideations. They're not properly informing these patients on what the side effects are of these.
It's a high percentage too. I think it's like 30% have suicidal ideations out of the first 6 months.
And then they're going off and killing themselves. It's crimes against. It's a violation of the Hippocratic Oath. It's do no harm, and you're handing out these synthetic, chemicals and killing service members and veterans at an alarming rate.
The new secretary, the VA secretary, is pretty open to alternative treatment, and they're more into like I don't really work in this space, but like the psilocybin THC world, he's open to that, but he's also open to the plant medicine that's more of like traditional plant medicine that way God created, and that he's been in a lot of hearings in that, and I'm actually working with a joint venture that's trying to bring alternative therapies and stuff like that to veterans to create like kind of like a BAS in a location to where if you didn't want to go to that, where you can go and get massages, sound therapy, light therapy, HBOTs, herbal supplements, stuff like that.
Well, and I know the VA's building a bunch of sea boxes around the nation that aren't your like centralized location, but little satellite clinics. And those would be here. Those would be a great location for a lot of these legit. I don't even want to call it alternative medicine. I want to call it legit medical treatment versus going into those big centralized hubs where they treat you. It's just a machine, and they're spitting.
It's just an algorithm. You're following through the algorithm of what you need.
They're just spitting them out, and they're like, "Oh, how could this?" Like we wonder why the suicide rate's so high. Like
it's known.
It's not rocket science. Basic root cause analysis, and then these doctors want to use the plausible deniability of a study that says, oh, well, it's just 25 years and under that suicidal, ideations are extremely.
That's the only cohort
common.
They looked at.
And I'm like,
they didn't look at
dude,
everybody.
you're talking about a human being. Like you think it stops at 25? Like you think it magically, why does it magically stop at 25? Oh, because you didn't actually look at anybody older than 25.
That's all they looked at, right?
You kept them out of the study. It was like, You guys are insane. You're insane. You're
Yeah, but
demonic.
Mark, I think it goes back to what you're saying. The main thing first is putting your faith in God. I mean, because it truly is the main path to healing is having strong faith,
These
and that's
doctors are going to have to get down on their knees and repent hard, uh, and take the accountability, which will be dished out to them. And that's the only way to do it, is to submit yourself. Makes the accountability a lot easier. You know, I'm just saying from
true.
experience, like, hey, the only reason I was able to get through a court martial was my faith in God, Jesus Christ Almighty. And I was able to get through the kangaroo court, the unlawful persecution, the weaponization of the entire Department of Defense against me and my family. So, you know,
What was that when you were going through all that? How were you able to? Because I know what I went through was stressful and more mind-boggling than anything. And then also not having a lot of exterior support, because it wasn't like my family standing there next to me as I'm like fighting this whole mandate. They kind of looked at me as like being like, why are you going to the school board meetings? Why are you going and speaking at the GOP convention and telling them that they need to recognize the fact that they're illegally mandating all these things? Like, they just didn't. I don't want to say they weren't supportive, but it wasn't like I had a big rally of people behind me. And I think, obviously faith, but I don't know how else would you manage that weight on your
I,
shoulders, I guess.
I mean, for me, I had an amazing wife that was in the trenches with me, and she's got her own faith-based connection with God Almighty, and um, she understood why I was doing what I was doing. That helped, but I'll tell you, the reprimandos like yourself, the patriots like yourself, and the many other service members, prior service members, current service members, even teachers. I've worked with teachers, and I would talk to them and I say, listen, this is what's going on. We're in the same boat. He's like, and they would be like, yep, this is what's going on my side in the classrooms, in this institution. Yep. I'm like, hey, we're in the same boat. Like there is
100%.
no, and that's what helped me through. My buddy John, he was a school teacher in Boston. We would constantly, I'd be like, John, it doesn't matter. You're a school teacher, I'm military, but we're in the same boat. Like you're being attacked at your level, I'm being attacked at my
Same
level.
fight. That's funny you say about.
It's the same thing, even down to the corporate man or woman who worked in a corporation. Same thing. And we're all in the same boat. There is no difference between a service member. It literally, it's you're a patriot or you're not.
And
And
it's interesting you brought up Boston, because I met a guy. There's a guy that works here on Emerald Isle who was a Boston PD firefighter who left Boston because of the mandates and the vaccines, and he couldn't even take his children to the library because they had a vaccine card, and he
yeah,
was a part of the whole firefighter union that was out in front of
yeah.
the mayor's office screaming at her and opening the
Yeah, the BFRU.
BFD
Yeah, the
BFRU. Yeah,
BFRU. Yeah, he probably knows my buddy John, who was, part of the BFRU as well.
probably. I'll shoot it to you offline to see if they know each other. But
Yeah,
he
yeah,
moved down there. Him and I started, and again, it's like once I met up with him, there's a couple other people. My friend Jim, who stood up in the water and had that famous photo and all that. Once you start meeting people like that, it just really, I don't know, like and then I hear about what was going on in Boston at the time, dude. And I was like, man, it
yeah.
wasn't what I experienced. Like they were
Oh,
fighting a fight up there. Like it was like a
still,
war. It really was a
I
war.
mean,
Yeah.
look at what's going on up there. You've got a mayor, a foreign belligerent mayor, probably not. Yeah, like legit.
Out of where ties to America is, yeah.
When I say foreign belligerent mayor, it means the election system was attacked by foreign entities and she was installed, right, by foreign entities. That's what I mean by that. And then you've got a federal judge who is acting as president in the District of Boston, this federal judge, and blocking Trump from stopping the funding of foreign aid to like schools because they're violating executive orders X, Y, and Z. And you've got this judge that's acting like president. It's crazy. He actually dismissed our case against a mayor in Newburyport, Massachusetts, for
I saw
flying a
that, yeah.
foreign belligerent flag on publicly owned
I
property. Is
saw that.
insane. No oath of office. Refused to put his oath of office on file. Right. We filed a motion to put his oath of office on file and appointment orders. Refused to do it. I reached out to his office to try to get a copy of it. Still no response. Nothing. I'm like, well, Why is that
That's a
such a
big
hard thing?
secret.
Like,
Yeah.
why is that that's basic records. Like, that's fundamental, basic root cause records.
I mean, if you're a
would say.
barber, you got to have a cert showing that you're a certified barber. Like, it's federal
Right.
judge should have that.
Those are, fundamental things, but they don't want to release them. So
Well, I don't
I
know
don't
if
know.
you make a reprimando patch for civilians, but I don't know if I rate one. But that's definitely something
I,
though.
I
I would.
think you earned a reprimando patch. I'm
Yes,
gonna have to send you a reprimand. Hell yeah, you earned a reprimando patch.
I
Yeah,
want it.
I'll
I've
have
been
to.
telling Ted Macy that I wanted one. I
Yeah,
told
it's
him that like
funny.
a year ago.
I was
I,
gonna say this. You remind me of Ted.
That's
You
Ted
could be
actually. I
brother.
sent him a
You
photo. He
could be
goes, we
brothers.
look exactly the same." That's what he said. He's like,
You
"We
could
look
be
exactly
brothers.
the
It's
same."
weird,
That
man.
his wife was like, "It's weird." They said the same thing. It's funny. I haven't met
I
Ted
wasn't gonna
yet.
say. Listen, I was gonna say anything, but I was thinking it for a while now. I'm like, wait a
Well, let
second.
him know that in real life it's true, because he mentioned that the other day too. And he was a rollerblader and I surf, so I was like making fun of him. I was
It's
like,
funny.
we're not the
Yeah, you
same.
both. He was a skateboarder, wasn't he?
No,
Skater.
he rollerblade. He did
Did he
rollerblading.
rollerblade? What whack, dude. Nobody
That's what I
rollerblades.
said. That's what I said.
Especially
So
in Boston with all the salts on the road. Ted, how did you rollerblade if you're watching this with all the salts on the roads? Come on, Ked. Come on, Ked. Anyway, this has been a fun episode. I'm gonna post this out. But any last words for the audience before I shut this down? Because this live stream shuts down at 2 hours. But any last comments? People can find you here. You got an X account.
yep, that's the best way to find me. I really
Your
appreciate it,
website.
Mark. Yeah, my website, you can check it out, blackflagbas.us. Like I said, I like to take personal clientels, and so if you're looking to get some help, shoot me a message on there, and we'll get you set up. And Mark, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. I mean, I really respected you even before I got to speak with you, and everything that you've been doing. It gave me motivation. It goes back to what you're saying. It's like you feed off of other people's kind of their strength and then their courage, and seeing what you went through with your family. And I was watching it, just imagining, if I was in your shoes, what I would be doing the same exact thing. But the kickback that you get from that experience is life changing, and I respect you for that and everything that you gave up, and I appreciate you. And happy Memorial Day. Thanks for what
Yeah.
you do. I know a lot of guys would appreciate that from our past, that you still stood against the wall. So
Well, likewise, man. And we're in the same boat, and we'll continue to be in the same boat, and we'll see where this boat ends up. But the waters might get rough again. You never know. You never know. We just
I
got to
think it's
be
going to change. Yeah.
We got to be watchmen on the wall. Watchmen on the wall, and secure the republic. And Lord willing, things will. We'll see some accountability. But
100%.
anyway, God bless, brother. Much love, folks. Check his website out and find him on X. Share this podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Much love. God bless.